Just to put things into a context, at the last census in 2011, there were almost 30,000 carers across Carmarthenshire. Now, 10 years has passed since the last census, and that figure is likely to have risen substantially. There are 487,000 carers across Wales. I think it would be remiss for me to stand here and talk about your rights without actually discussing what's actually happened in the world of carers during the last year, during the COVID pandemic. So during the pandemic, for a host of different reasons, obviously lack of PPE, families were afraid to have people coming into properties, and it is estimated that there was an additional 200,000 carers on top of the 487,000 carers during the last year. So that took the figure up to 687,000 people across Wales with a caring responsibility. 50% of those people were also juggling paid work alongside their caring role. And from our research, 80% of carers reported they were providing more care than before the pandemic actually began. 76% said the person they looked after needed additional support. And 76% of carers, unsurprisingly, reported that they were exhausted. And that is from taking on additional caring responsibilities during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, carers, it was estimated, saved the Welsh economy £8.1 billion a year. If the care that you provide had to be replaced by statutory services, so those are the services that come in from local authorities or health to actually support you. So you actually save the economy £8.1 billion. During the pandemic, that increased from our estimation to 12 billion a year, and that equated to £33 million a day. So that's just a little bit of a context from the last year alone. Carers' rights in Wales are enshrined in law, and in 2016, the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act 2014 was enacted. The intention of that act was to transform the way the social services are being delivered in Wales. The Minister at the time, Gwenda, realised that people are starting to live longer with longer term health conditions and would need to be supported. And as part of that as well, there was also a realisation that there would need to be more unpaid family carers as well as paid care workers to actually look after people safely. So the whole Act's emphasis is about prevention, so preventing people getting to the stage where they need that more formal support, and around people's well-being as well. Because if people can stay as healthy for as long as possible, then there will be no need then for services to come in. The focus on the Act is on people's strengths and capacities, so people's ability to actually live independently as safely for as long as possible in their own homes. And that strength and capacity as well also relates to carers' strength and capacity to be able to continue to care. And the Act includes new rights for carers and puts them on an equal footing with the people that they look after. Previously, we had loads of different legislation. That was all lumped into this legislation, apart from a few anomalies, but the Act is cradle to grave, and it applies to children as well as adults. So the Act places a statutory duty on local authorities to provide an information, advice and assistance service. And the local authority should be able to provide you with that information and advice on support services in your area, places like Carmarthenshire Carers Project, possibly the Alzheimer's Society down this area may have services that would actually help you, and they should actually be helping you to access that care and support. But a local authority must offer an assessment to any carer where it appears to that local authority that the carer may need support. And that assessment could be and should be proportionate to that carer's needs at that particular point in time. The assessment must consider your well-being and the personal outcomes that you want to achieve in your day-to-day life. It must also have due regard as to whether you work, wish to work, or undertake any training or leisure activities. It's important, we just heard Rhian's story, that you are able as carers to be able to look after your own health and well-being. And that is enshrined in law. And that is so important because if you were unable for whatever reason to look after your own health and well-being, what happens is that the health service ends up with 2 patients instead of 1. So really, it's a bit of a no-brainer. And the duty applies regardless of the authority's view of your financial resources or the financial resources of the person that you look after. It also got rid of the regular and substantial clause that was in the previous law. So it doesn't matter whether you were caring an hour a week or whether you were caring 24/7. If you feel you need an assessment of need, then you are legally entitled to request that assessment. The local authority quite often take what's called the whole approach. So they may come out and they may be doing an assessment of the person that you look after. And during that assessment process, they should also be having a conversation with you about what you are able and willing to provide as a carer. Nobody has to care. It is a choice, and it is your choice about what you are able and willing to provide. And I'll give an analogy. I looked after my dad who had a stroke. My dad looked after me from the age of 10 when my mother died. And he was immobile. And great, you know, I had no problem with looking after dad, but I did not want to do his personal care. I wasn't willing to do it. And not only was I not willing to do it, actually dad didn't want me to do it either. So when they came out and did dad's care plan, you know, I was adamant that, you know, that was something that I was not prepared to do. Don't get me wrong, in an emergency, yes, absolutely, I would. So what happened then was the local authority put in a care plan so that he had care workers coming in to undertake that personal care for him every day. So it is a choice and you have that right. Sometimes it's not always appropriate to be assessed at the same time as the person you look after. Again, dad would turn around and say, oh, that's okay, Beth will do that. And I was sitting there thinking, no, Beth won't. Not that I didn't want to, but I wasn't able to. And I didn't want to upset dad by actually turning around in front of dad and saying that. So it's not always appropriate because you can't have that really open, honest discussion sometimes when the person you look after is there. So at the end of the assessment, I rang the social worker up and I said, look, let's get something straight here. You know, what dad said, I'm not able to do that. And the care plan, again, was amended accordingly. Also, the person that you look after, if they've got a mental capacity, may not want to have an assessment done in their own right. So even if the person that you look after hasn't had any disabled person's needs assessment by the local authority, you still have that freestanding right to a carer's needs assessment. Right. And again, if you do not feel that your needs have been properly addressed, you still have that legal right to request an assessment. But also, you know, as things happen within families, you know, situations change, you may want a review of an existing assessment. And during that change of circumstances, the person you may look after may have got worse, something may have happened within the family unit, you can request a review of an existing assessment. Okay, so there is an eligibility criteria laid down in the law, but as long as you meet that eligibility criteria, you have an enforceable right to support from the local authority, and the local authority has a legal duty to actually provide you with a support plan. Or if the person you were looking after has a care and support plan, you also have a legal right to have a copy of that plan. If you're not happy with any of the process, you can invoke the complaints procedure. And with the local authority, it's a two-tier complaints procedure. So you would complain initially to the local authority, they would come back with a response. If you're still not happy, you can complain again. They will then come back with a response, and then if you're still not happy, you can actually take that complaint to the Ombudsman for Wales. And we've got information on all of this in our fact sheets. So not only are we talking about the Social Services Act, you have other legal rights. You've got a right to time off from work in emergencies to care for dependents. You've got the right to request flexible working from your employers. You have parental and shared parental leave if you are a parent carer. You have the right not to be discriminated against because of your association with a disabled person, and that's the Equality Act 2010. You also have rights if you were looking after someone with mental health problems under the Mental Health Wales measure 2010, and you have got a right to be involved in the hospital discharge process, as well as receiving a support needs assessment before you take on any caring role. And again, that is enshrined within the Act. You've also got rights as well under the Human Rights Act, and that is an extremely strong piece of legislation. So when people are doing your assessments, they should have due regard to the Human Rights Act when they're undertaking that. What I would just say is that was just a brief skip through the Act. We do regularly undertake training for carers on the Act, which are more in depth. So you can join our organisation for free, and you will be notified then of any training that actually comes up. We've also got as well an advice and information service, and generally it's me who deals with that. So you can give us a ring if you've got any problems, and I can sort of point you in the right direction and explain, you know, the legislation and law. So there we go. Thank you very much.